Hi, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. My name is Kelly. I am so excited to host both Brom and T. Kingfisher. I already am slurring my words. But anyways, I'm so excited to have both of them here tonight. So excited to have you all here. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce Brom, who is an acclaimed dark fantasy artist and author. He's the author of The Child Thief, Krampus, The Lost Gods, and the award-winning illustrated horror novels, the PLUCKER and The Devil's Rose. And, of course, most recently, Sleuth It, which is on sale tomorrow. In conversation with Brom tonight is T. Kingfisher, who writes fantasy, horror, and occasional oddities, most recently including The Twisted Ones and SWORDHEART, as well as the upcoming Nettle and Bone, available for pre-order now. I'm so excited for this event tonight. I've been a longtime fan of Brom's work and absolutely loved Sleuth It. I know you all will too. I'm reading Nettle and Bone right now, and I cannot wait for you all to learn more about that book tonight because it's a lot of fun. Before I disappear and let the two authors talk tonight, I'm going to give you all a quick rundown of Crowdcast. To the right-hand side is our chat section. So make sure that you use this section to talk with each other, send comments to the authors, but don't send questions. Make sure that you send your questions to the Ask a Question box right here. People can vote on them and send questions up in the queue. But if you ask a question in the chat box, we won't see it. So be sure to ask it in the Ask a Question box right here. Finally, make sure to check out the blue Purchase Books Here button to check out all of the authors' titles here at Mysterious Galaxy. And remember that your purchase for this event will include a signed and personalized bookplate from the author. All right, that's it from me. I'm going to disappear and I will let the two of you talk. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Ursula, if you don't mind, I want to say something real quick. So this week I have 4 virtual events and with 4 different authors. So I was sent 4 different books to read, and the book I was sent from Ursula was What Moves the Dead. And I figured, okay, I'm just going to speed read this thing real quick so I can have some talking points. But I have to say this book is so good and so creepy that I had to slow down and oh no, I really want to take this in. So I've been enjoying the heck out of it. I'm not finished with it, but I'm loving where it is so far. So with that, I would love some insight on your thoughts on just some background on that book.
Good heavens. I'm so glad you're enjoying it. Okay, let me get this out of the way. Oh my God, you're Brom. You know you're Brom. I still have... This is my copy of Darkworks from 1998.
God. Wow.
All right. I'm cool.
I'm
a mature professional. What Moves the Dead was actually, it's a retelling sort of a Fall of the House of Usher, because one day I went and reread Fall of the House of Usher, as one does, and said, wow, this is much shorter than I remember it being. It's a very short... for some reason I had the idea it was a novella or something. It's a short story and a very compact short story. And I was like, but I want to know more things. There is a lot going on here that is obviously related, and Poe has not told us any of it. And it's very impressive in how short it is, with the sort of shadow it is cast in popular culture. But I wanted to know more. There was so much there I could get into and poke, and obviously a lot more behind the story. And also the narrator is a deeply useless person. So I wanted to replace the narrator with someone slightly less useless. So yeah, that's about where it came from. What Moves the Dead is a novella coming out from Nightfire at some point in the future. I don't have an exact date, so yeah.
It's July 22nd.
Oh, hey!
No, July 2022.
July 2022. See, it's good to know that. I don't think I knew that. So yes, and I am thrilled that people are enjoying it, and I hope that anyone who reads it will also enjoy it. It's there's some body horror, so if you're not into that, maybe
Well, one of the things that fascinated with me was, your deep knowledge of fungi, etc. And digging into your bio a little bit, I understand you're quite the avid gardener. How much did that add to your experience writing this?
Well, a central theme of What Moves the Dead is fungus, and it somewhat, I suppose, I do see fungus and mycelium. I mean, I don't see the mycelium, but I know they're there a lot. I think about them probably more than is emotionally healthy for one to think about mycelium. But there was a lot of research I had to do for the book, and the problem was that there's what I know, and then there's what people set in 1890 Europe would know. So I was frequently going back and cross-referencing, when did we first discover this? Okay, there was a report in the Annals of the Mycological Society from Germany in 1891, so I could do that.
Yeah.
And there's it's different than when you're writing just pure fantasy that is secondary world, because you don't have to do quite as much accurate history, I suppose.
Oh, absolutely. With the writing of Slewfoot, this was the first historical novel I wrote, and it was good. It was fun and it was hard. I mean, it was fun digging in and learning so much, but at the same time, the need to get it right, is important. But I was amazed at how much I discovered in historical texts that is basically unbelievable. Like if you wrote it in fiction, nobody would believe you. But
oh yeah. And did you do the thing where you'd wind up reading for 2 hours for what wound up to be about one sentence?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would just go off on tangents. One of the fascinating things, and I'm going off a tangent right now, is when I was digging into the Puritans. And I almost wanted to start a whole nother book based on this. There was like, we think of America being founded by Puritans, but there were a couple of other groups that tried as well. And one of them was called Marymount. It was a town, I believe I forget which state it was in, but it was at the same time the Puritans were colonizing, and it was by a very open-minded, I don't know if he was quite a pagan, but he definitely was a Puritan, and he set up this town, and it was basically, they had pagan parties, they merrymaking and consorting, with Native Americans. They really had a good time, and the Puritans did not appreciate this at all. And
I can't imagine Cotton Mather would have been pleased.
No, not at all. And I believe the guy whose name was Thomas Morton that set up the town, and he was constantly poking at the Puritans, and he erected, pardon the pun, a large maypole in the middle, a very phallic maypole in the middle of the town, and they did a big celebration for his birthday and stuff. But it did not end well for him. The Puritans eventually burned the town down, put him in prison, and then banished him from America.
And this is why we can't have nice things.
I know. Well, what a story that is. I do hope somebody is writing an account of that or making a movie of that.
When you're researching something, you're like, this is a whole nother book or two. That is one of the great dangers.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So Slewfoot, tell me about Slewfoot. I was supposed to have a copy that I could have read and then asked very good questions about, but unfortunately, due to shipping delays that are going and postal delays that are going on all over the country, it should arrive tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, I just, as a matter of fact, received my copy just a couple days ago, and as an author, a book does not feel real until you hold the physical copy in your hand. So this is quite the thrill, and just pleased as Peach with how well the publisher, put everything together. Nightfire, there's so much attention to detail and so much help on every step of the way by editors, by authenticity readers. Speaking of historical context, I had some people help me with that, which was great. And especially the editors. I'm a writer that really appreciates editors because I need them. But that said, it is essentially a historical horror novel, my first historical horror novel, set in colonial America in the 1600s. It's about what happens when a spirited young woman with a pagan upbringing is sold off to be married into a Puritan colony. And this, by the way, really happened. They were short on brides in the colonies, so the king was paying ransoms for people to send their young daughters over. It follows her journey as she tries to navigate, a very treacherous and unforgiving society that's bent on finding witches and the devil under every rock. So enter into this situation the devil, or in this case, he's an ancient forest spirit trying to find his role in the new world, and that's pretty much the setup for Slewfoot.
That sounds awesome.
It was a lot of fun to write. And, you know, one of the things I think when I talk about my books and stuff, you know, just telling what it's about doesn't, I think how I can really communicate what makes me interested and excited about a book is to tell people what inspired it or where this came from. In this case, I can't tell you how many times I've watched, you know, documentaries on the Salem witch trials, and both the book by Arthur Miller, The Crucible, and the movie as well with Winona Ryder and Daniel Day-Lewis. And every time I watch those, you know, to me, I sit there and think, God, wouldn't it be cool if they really were witches, you know, and if they really had the devil as an ally? Like, what an interesting story that would be. So that was, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, what always struck me when we were studying the Salem witch trials was I always thought, man, these people were thinking small, because if you were really, you know, a consort of Satan and had amazing power, what are you doing? You're souring the milk and giving the cow boils. It's like, no, for that kind of payoff, ask for the entire eastern seaboard.
Yeah, right.
Don't just make the cow sick. But yeah, sorry. No one had ambition. Damn it.
I know. Very good point. We were talking about, you know, doing research, and when I was digging into this story initially, you know, I wasn't exactly sure where it was going to go. I just really wanted those accused of being witchcraft to actually, you know, have witch powers in some form or another. But one of the things I came across historically, which was fascinating, is I noticed how many times or how often it seemed that it was widows that were accused of witchcraft. You know, why are they always going after widows? Well, one of the interesting things in Puritan society is, you know, women had no authority or power as far as government and, you know, decision making for the society as a whole. They were very much restrained to, you know, the household, so to speak. They weren't allowed to be involved in any of the votes or decision making. It was actually against the law for them to be involved in any businesses. They had no property. They weren't slaves, but they were, for all intents and purposes, under the rule of their husbands. There's one exception to this, and that's if the husband dies. And according to Puritan, you know, canon, their law, it is God Himself ordains that it's the widow's role to then fulfill the husband's wishes the best she can. So in this odd, you know, very rare circumstances, suddenly a woman in this patriarchy society has the same level of, you know, say and power as the men. So that must have been shocking, for one thing, to have a woman suddenly being able to, you know, have as much say as the men. So I could see that could be challenging, so to speak. But leading up to why they were so often accused of witches is that, and that's the one case where the women also were able to have ownership of land. And so if there was a dispute, or if you were wanting to try to maybe take that land, or for whatever reason, it's very tempting for somebody just to simply accuse that widow of witchcraft, in which case, you know, in those days, it wasn't prove them guilty, it was prove yourself innocent. So that right there was like, oh, that's the plot. That's everything I need to know. Just throw the devil in the middle of that. So.
Now, I noted the painting behind you is not the cover for Slewfoot, but is close. So did you, if you want to show off yes, definitely, clearly similar things. So did you start with that painting?
I did, exactly. And you might have experienced this before, but I usually try, you know, as both of us are people who do art with our prose, I tend to try to get my prose locked down before I start painting, because as you well know, things change in the story. And in this case, I got excited and got ahead of myself, and I did the painting behind me first. But the character of Abatha changed so much, and what ended up happening in the story ended up not lining up. So I ended up doing the second painting.
I have done that on, I did a series of children's books under a different name, and which would have up to about 150 little illustrations a piece. And if we changed a chapter, I would be sitting there going, oh God, I have to redraw so many little dragons now.
Absolutely. So I've been doing a lot of research on you the last day. So I have a couple of questions for you. So the first thing I was fascinated by was how many novels you have out there. But not only that, I read that you work on multiple novels at a time. So that said, before I get to that question, you actually have 2 novels coming out next year. And if I get this right, your next one is Nettle and Bone, and that's coming out in April 2022. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
We would love to hear a little bit about that one, please.
Oh, well, if you insist. I mean, if Brom asked me to talk about my novel, well, gee. This is a fantasy novel about... oh God, I don't know how to describe it. I wrote it, but that doesn't mean I know what it's about. It's about a woman whose sisters have married a prince, and she's a princess. She's the youngest of 3. Her sisters keep marrying the same prince, and they either turn up dead or are very, very unhappy, and very bad things are happening. And finally, she's like, I've had enough of this. We're going to have to kill this guy. But it is very difficult when you are a 30-year-old nun to go off and kill the prince of a major kingdom who could crush your kingdom underfoot. So it starts there, and then there's a demon chicken and a witch who talks exclusively to the dead and a godmother. And so it's... I always say the books are fun. I have no real concept of what is fun and what is horror, as people tell me frequently when I try to write romance. So I think it's fun.
It is bad when your sensibility that horror is funny to you and you don't understand why other people aren't laughing when blood and gore is splattering all over the page.
It's not even the blood and gore. It's just when something horrible happens, my instinct is to make a joke, because otherwise I will have to face that something is horrible. So, and I'm sure, many people who write very dark books are very cheerful, lighthearted people who are, it's like, what? I got all the weird stuff out on the page. It's fine. I suppose people probably expect you to show up looking like, Dracula or something.
Yeah. People are usually disappointed when they meet me in person for many reasons, but that's one of them. Yes.
I'm not disappointed, for the record.
That's funny.
So I wrote this book. Yes, I write a number of books. I have pretty severe ADHD. And so I will write on a book until I get to a point where I don't know what happens next, and then I will go work on the next manuscript. And sometimes that is by paragraph. There were points where if I had deadlines on 2 different things, I would have a children's book up in the Word document and a horror novel up in the Word document, and I would write some and then flip to the other one. It's, I admire people who can do the super deep dive into one book, and I know people who are like, I have to concentrate on this one thing to the exclusion of all else. And if it works for you, great. Do you have to do that? Just focus on one project, or bounce around, or?
Yeah. It's funny for me with art. It's easy. I prefer to have 3 or 4 paintings going at once, and I like to work on a painting and put it aside and work on another one, and then I can come back with fresh eyes to look at the other one. But with novels, it's not that way. I get so deep into, I'm just the person you talked about, I get so deep into it, but I also, it's hard enough for me to keep the whole plot and everybody's characters in my head at one time. I think if I had 3, I would get confused. As a matter of fact, when people ask me about my other books, it's like I forget the character's name, and I get one kind of overlap in the other one. So I admire that you can do that.
Oh, don't worry. I've forgotten all of the books I have already written. Like, immediately people are like, okay, so why did this happen? And I'm like, that's a great question. Give me 10 minutes to go reread the book and find out.
So I have a couple of questions that I really wanted to ask you when I was doing a deep dive onto you in Google here, which I was surprised at how little information there was on you. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but what, at least in your bio, it's like you're managing to hide that. But I did have this come up. It was when I Googled, Ursula, not T.
Yeah, Ursula Vernon. It's fine. Everyone knows who I am. It's cool. I mean, everyone knows who I really am. Not like a do you know who I am? No one knows who I am in that sense. But go on.
Google asked me, it said, people also ask, is Ursula Vernon still alive? so I have to know, is she?
As far as I know, I have not read her obituary recently, and I frequently see her husband, and he has not mentioned her dying.
Okay, go ahead. Now, here's another thing I have to ask you. Is it true that your cat taught itself how to use the toilet?
Yes, that is entirely true. The cat is named Sergei, and one day I walked into the bathroom, and he was using the toilet, and immediately the instinct that you have walked on someone else in the bathroom kicked in. I was like, oh God, I'm so sorry. And I walked away. And then I was like, wait a minute, that was the cat. Yes, he taught himself. Fortunately, he has not taught himself to flush because our water bill would suddenly go through the roof.
It's funny, I actually hear my cat screaming to come into the room as we speak. My wife's corralling the two chihuahuas, but the cat wants in. We did something that's both good and a bit of a nuisance. We trained the chihuahuas to ring a bell whenever they need to go out to go to the bathroom.
Oh, that's very clever. A friend of mine's corgis do that. Yes.
Yeah, and it's awesome when they have to go to the bathroom. But they also, for them though, the dog's name is Myrtle, and Myrtle thinks the bell means Myrtle wants. So she gets confused, and anytime she wants anything, she rings the bell. It's pretty much come hither, come to me now. So we put the bell up for this.
It's like the servant bell in Victorian England.
Yes.
She was just ringing for staff to come
Yeah.
attend. So you have chihuahuas.
I have two chihuahuas, yes. They're like a half a dog each, so together they make one dog, yes.
Understandable, yeah.
Absolutely. So I took an opportunity to write down a few questions, so I'll run them, and I think we can bounce them off of each other.
Sure, and I see people have a couple questions in.
Oh, do we have some questions?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we can have some of those if you like.
Okay, let's see. Actually, let's. I'm kind of. It's not often I get to talk to another author artist, so I have a couple of questions that I often get asked that I would like to find out from you. And we touched on this a little bit before. And one of the first one people often ask me is, which comes first, is the art or the prose? And we touched on that a bit. But even though you wait to do the finished work until the prose is mostly in place, do you do a lot of like conceptual sketches or just ideas to flesh out the characters to figure out what they look like?
I do for the comic stuff. I will usually do pages of characters first so that I know what they look like, what the design is like before I have to start work, because otherwise the style will evolve over time a lot more, and you'll wind up with the character looking very different on page 1 than they do on page 100. So definitely for the comics I do. Oddly enough, it seems like it's two different parts of my brain for books that I'm not doing the illustration for. And then I have like no visual at all. I'm like, the book is made entirely of words from beginning to end. I don't know anything about the pictures in there. If I don't go into it knowing I'll illustrate it, it's like that part doesn't turn on at all.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, with myself, I think originally I got my career started. I've always written as a child. I used to draw pictures and put prose under them and staple them together and make a book, and it's really funny. It's the same thing I'm doing now all these years later, except using oil paints and word processors and so on and so forth.
And you have Nightfire to do all the stapling for you.
Exactly, yeah. It really helps with the blisters. So in the beginning, the first books I did with my painting, I got my painting career going, and after a while I sort of burnt out because there was a point where I feel like I was reliant on commissions, and I feel like the people that were commissioning me were wanting me to sort of do the same painting I'd done over and over again. And I figured that at that time, it was before, a lot of the Kickstarters and that stuff. So you were depending on publishers to get things out there. And I felt like the only way I could break that is if I, wrote my own material, and then I'd have some control of what I'm painting. So my original book, like The Plucker and the Devil's Rose, they were very heavy on art. They were art on one page and prose on the other. So in those cases, those books were completely steered by what I wanted to draw and paint at the time, whether it was evil toys or, undead
I still
people.
remember the doll head drums from the PLUCKER, just for the record.
There you go. Or if it's undead zombies on motorcycles, same sort of thing. But at some point, the writer in me was like, wanted to prove itself. Can I do a book that's on prose itself? And that the writer in me quickly found out that, it's, having a good, solid story idea, something that's the plot and everything that I guess what I'm trying to say became first. That needed to be worked out before the pictures could come. But even so, there was I would always have some kind of idea of what the characters were, and I would start doing some rough sketching as I wrote. And as I dug into the story, I would start the drawings and paintings would become more detailed. And one of the things I found fascinating is at times I almost felt like two different creatives collaborating, because there was stuff I would find, in the painting that I wouldn't have thought in the writing I'd put in the writing, or just the other way around. And at the same time, there were sometimes when there were conflicts. There were stuff the writer wanted to do that, the artist didn't want to paint, or the other way around. So
Artist me has occasionally said, no, we're not setting this final scene in a cathedral because I'm not drawing it. So you can set it somewhere that is not lots of perspective and stained glass. God damn it. My wrists will fall off. Yeah, but definitely there's, because I would usually do the writing first and then start on the art, there would be times when artist me would get to a scene and be like, curse you, writer me, what have you set me up for? It's the two are not always in perfect agreement.
No, not at all.
So you're doing everything in oils?
I am, yeah. I'm a traditionalist, and it's not that I have anything against digital art. It's just that I just don't have the skill set there, and I love making, the craft of traditional. I love, making something I can hold and whatnot. But more than anything, it's just the medium I'm most comfortable in. So.
Absolutely. So I just pure art geek. Are you working on canvas or board or clapboard or?
All of the above.
Panel?
So, one of the things I found out is variety keeps things interesting. Like I was mentioning, when I got burnt out on illustration, I started writing, and that reinvigorated my love of painting, putting the stuff together. And I find the same with painting. Sometimes I like to paint big, and then I'll paint small, sometimes on canvas, sometimes on illustration board, because each of these surfaces bring a new challenge. So anything just to keep it interesting.
Yeah, whenever I used to get burnt out, I would take up a new medium for a while and be like, maybe pastel is where it's at today.
That's
so
fun.
Yeah.
What is your medium of choice? Do you have one?
These days it's mostly digital. I'll do acrylic and acrylic ink and colored pencil. Basically, clear gesso is like the greatest invention known to man, as far as I'm concerned. Not to get too deep in the technical art weeds for the people watching. Yeah, digital these days just because it's faster, and so many things that I did on the comic books would have to be resized or moved around, or they would require lettering. Yeah. And it's a lot easier to move word balloons around and write whatnot for comics if you're working digitally. But yeah.
So, you've written a lot of novels. Do you find that they all exist in the same universe? Are they connected in some way, or are they completely unique? And
there's 3 or 4 different universes, and occasionally there's sort of a metaverse where that they're not really connected so much as I feel like if you opened the right doorway, you would be like in an access tunnel like the ones under Disneyland, and you could go through them, and it would be very dark and full of concrete and sort of iffy lighting. And then you could come out in another one of the universes, maybe, which is an interesting place by itself. And occasionally I try to, set stories there, but it's a little resistant to too much poking, I think.
Yeah, actually, that's fascinating to think about the story of the connecting worlds. That is
So do yours are yours set? Like I could see the Child Thief and Krampus, being both connected by being mythological, but.
Yeah, it wasn't conscious at first, but I realized because of my, just my ideology, how much it seeps into the books. and my view of the universe and how things are connected, I realized that they all live in the same world, and they could easily step into each other's world. And some of them, much closer than others. The Devil's Rose and Lost Gods are the same world. There aren't any of the same characters, but it's one of the big challenges of working out Lost Gods. Lost Gods is a book about a soul's journey through purgatory, and it's very physical when he's down there. And it's funny, the things you think you think a book's going to be about, and it turns out being about, meaning, when you're down in purgatory and you're writing a story and you need some element of fear and risk, and it's like, well, do the dead die? Can the dead die again? And if they do die again, what happens? And you have to work that out, even if it's not all wrapped up into the story. It has to.
Yeah. And
what I worked out, in that, and most of the stories do connect, and it almost always comes down to belief systems, gods and demons, and all of these, they all, in almost all my stories, they draw their powers from things believing in them, which makes them real, which makes complete sense. No matter how you look at it, meaning, if you believe in something, even if it's not real, it can be real and it can affect you. And then, in my world, if you believe in something, it goes beyond that. It does actually, manifest the thing that people believe in. So.
The divine placebo effect.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So is Slewfoot part of that universe, or is this, since it's historical, a sort of branching out into a whole new world?
It completely ties in, and that was really a lot of the fun of it. Again, putting that real historical world element into it, and then the otherworldness, which connects to the other story. Yeah.
Cool.
Should we start answering some questions?
Yeah, I'm thinking, let's see, let's try, for Brom, which of your books is a good starting point for a new reader?
For a new reader. So that's a great question, because I'm going to start with a question, and then I'm going to answer this question. So Ursula, when you read, first of all, do you read reviews? And when you read reviews, what do you take away from them? Because in my experience, I have people, one person will love one thing, the next person will not like that thing, but they'll love the thing that it's very contrary, and it's not consistent. So that said, what do you take from your reviews? Do you look at them?
There are very limited circumstances when I will read my reviews. Like, I will read if they're published somewhere and someone sends me a link. I'm like, okay, Locus reviewed the book, I will go read this review. I do not go on to Goodreads because, as they say, there is evil there that does not sleep. And also because, that's a space for readers, not me. People should feel able to say whatever the heck they want about the book, if they hated it or not, without worrying that I'm looking over their shoulder. But for the most part, I don't read long reviews. But what strikes me, what you're saying about people taking different things away, is, which is actually sort of related to something taking place in the chat, what people find scary is wildly different. Like, I have people who are like, okay, your horror novels were fine, I found them charming. I have other people, my editor at the time was like, yeah, so I pretty much need to spend the night on top of the refrigerator with the lights on. It's what people are scared by is such a deeply individual thing. It's often less quality, and just, this is the thing that had the key to freak me out. And like monsters that I thought were just throwaway things in a book I wrote, SWORDHEART, which I thought was a romance at the time, had some weird little jellyfish sort of flying things that would fall on people and try to climb up their nose. I thought they were like a D&D monster kind of thing, and if anything, people would think they were silly. And I have gotten more people going, those things scared the ever-loving crap out of me. And I'm like, but it was a fluffy romance novel. And other people, will be like, yeah, that didn't bother me at all, but I was really freaked out by the school bus scene in the hollow places, whatever.
Yeah.
There's no telling.
I guess part of the reason I asked that question, the perfectionist in me, I've always been self-taught with art and even writing to some degree. So I love to look into things to get feedback. And the thing that I realized right away that writing, I think we lost Ursula. Hopefully she will be back.
I hear you. I
Okay.
can hear you just fine.
Oh, good. We lost your picture. But
Okay.
what I was going to say is I quickly realized that writing is very subjective, and it's a lot like music. What sings to one person doesn't sing to another. So and what I'm leading up to our question, which book do you recommend to a reader, is I quickly realized that different books sing differently to different people. So it's kind of hard to recommend unless you kind of know who the reader is. But that said, my personal favorite of the books I've read is Krampus. Krampus, as most of you know, is cast as a Christmas demon, but his pagan roots come way before Christmas and before Santa Claus. And he's just my favorite character, and any character that basically puts naughty children in bags and beat them. How can you go wrong writing a story about such a critter? So Krampus is my personal favorite and recommendation.
I have to ask, is that a Krampus mask on the wall in the upper right on your screen?
There is a Krampus mask up high there. I don't know if I can get it. Oh, there it is. Yeah, there we go. Yes, I love my Krampus.
That's fantastic. So Krampus is the one you would just enjoyed and
I enjoyed
recommend?
writing it, and I feel the best about it just from a writer's point of view. But it's not necessarily the favorite of the best-selling, or necessarily favorite. But what of your books? Which one would you recommend to us?
Oh Lord, this is where it comes down to. Well, what do you want? If you want a fairy tale retelling, The Seventh Bride is a nice one. If you want something that is very sort of lighthearted and for a slightly younger audience, Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. But if you want one of the more adult high fantasy or low fantasy, or I don't even know what the difference between high and low fantasy is anymore. I don't think anyone does. You want to start with Clockwork Boys. So yeah, it's what are you in the mood for, I suppose, a lot of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and books they have tones and moods. So that's Krampus obviously around Christmas season, excellent, and pretty much all the rest around Halloween. I don't know.
Oh yeah. I suppose it's nice to know that people will really want your books around Halloween, but have you thought about doing an Easter book?
I have. I mean, after I did Krampus, I started like, what is the true story of the Easter Bunny? But I'm sure somebody is on that already.
I'm sure, but they wouldn't do it quite like you would.
I mean, all of these characters, they have their mythology. They come from somewhere, and when you start digging in, they're usually from scary places. I mean, they're usually either cautionary tales, or they're they were originally part of a ritual where they burned people in wicker baskets. So I don't know.
Yeah. Have you ever seen some of the wild men costumes from Europe? The really strange shaggy ones that don't have faces and things. Those are fantastic. I was like, I don't know what that ties to, but God, that's cool.
A lot of those are Belsnickels. They're all variations of Krampus and Krampus creatures. When I was doing my research on Krampus, I was fascinated by the fact that there were so many variations. And in some countries, it will be a group of Krampuses or Belsnickels or whatever the many names. There's a female ones, and there's just, but they're all very similar in that they're basically creatures that, if you're not a good boy or girl throughout the year, you're not going to get a nice present. You're going to get a good comeuppance.
It's cross-cultural. I mean, there are, I want to say there's a whole set of monster Kachinas in the American Southwest that's from the Native American groups who are, these are the ones that are supposed to scare kids into behaving properly. So wherever you go, there's somebody to scare the crap out of your small children. What it really says is that naughty children are cross-cultural. Everybody has to deal with rotten kids at some point. So. I should point out that someone in chat is just offering to give you money for evil Easter Bunny, and I have to agree. I get on that one. All right, let me see. Here's another next question. Is we talked about illustration and text.
Any thoughts about making any of your books into film? I'd love to see Krampus on the screen. I would too. All my books are in the process of trying to get them into films, and I learned early on that it's something that's just so out of my control. Sometimes things get options, sometimes they move forward a little bit, and then they just disappear. We do have some good traction going on 2 of them, but I can't say anything at this point. Ursula, have you had much?
I haven't had much luck with it. I mean, I've optioned books, and then people get excited, and then crickets. As I asked my agent one time, we had just optioned a book to Disney of all people, and I was like, and it was a good sum of money. I was not crying about the option money, and I was like, so assuming there's a 1 in 1,000 chance of a book being made into a movie, now that we've signed the option, what are the odds? She's all 1 in 999.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, options are great because it's money you don't have to do anything for, that just shows up occasionally, but very rarely does it seem they turn into anything.
Yeah. Yep. So just burn the voodoo candles, and maybe one day it will happen.
Yeah, it's if it was within the author's control, then it would be a different world.
Yeah. It takes a lot of people to make a movie, that's for sure. Here's a question for you, Ursula. It says, how can you code switch from one story to another so fast? You sort of answered that, but do you have any more to add to that?
Honestly, it's I blame the ADHD. I don't know how other people can't. So it's not any great talent I have particularly. It's the same reason that I once wound up in the backyard taking photographs of a butterfly while the engine was running in the truck that was halfway down the driveway with the door open. So, I went to take the dog, and I had to go back inside because I'd forgotten something, and then the dogs needed to go out, and then I had to take the dogs in the backyard, and then there was an interesting bug, so I got my camera to take the photo of the bug, and meanwhile, the truck was sitting in the driveway idling. So, ADHD.
Well, you're certainly making it work for you, so that's good there.
If you have issues, put them in harness and make them pull. Well, I see one for you, probably for you. Typing or pen? Do you write anything longhand, or do you type it all out?
No, and what's sad is how I've actually forgotten how to write longhand. It's just, who would have ever thought, and I went to high school in the 70s and the 80s, and who, back before the computer, and one of the classes I took was typing, and who would have ever thought that would be my most important class I took in high school?
Yep. No, I was in high school in the 90s, and keyboarding still was worth more than 99% of all the other classes I took.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I do have to say I do occasionally get the notebook and do the big, broad story outlining and discovery to some degree. But when it actually comes to the prose, I'm helpless without the word processor, because I just love to just throw whatever sentences and paragraphs that are coming out of my head down, and then I take that hat off and put on another hat and come back and start trying to make them into something that makes sense.
The big problem I have is writing longhand feels so slow now after knowing how to type for a while. It's like, no, I can get everything down much faster and move it around if I have to.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. We have another question here.
Where does your knowledge of mythology come from? Have you always been interested in it?
I have. Yeah, and it was hard not to be. When I was young, I lived in, we lived in a couple different places, but when my dad went off to Vietnam, we were in Alabama, and the library was where I would go to, find my inspiration. Spent a lot of time looking at dinosaur books. Those were my dragons and stuff at the age. But mythology, it just, that was like my fantasy books for a long time. But, as far as knowledge, part of it is you get into a book and you do a lot of research. So I tend to know a lot about a few things, but completely fascinated by how, number one, how all the cultures have so many similar themes and characters. I mean, even religions, when you look at them, they really break down to a lot of similarities. So I really enjoy mythology on many levels. Ursula, you?
I was also reading a lot of mythology books, and because that's what I had, and it was much more, I think, acceptable than bringing home fantasy novels. My mom was always a little dicey if I wanted to bring home, Dragonlance, but if I had Edith Hamilton's Greek mythology, that was fine and totally acceptable. This is not a plug for Hamilton's mythology, which glosses over everything, and every mythology buff on earth screams and weeps when the name comes up. But and then my degree is in anthropology, not in either art or writing, mostly because I thought all of that was just so fascinating and kept going with it. But yeah, you learn very, very narrow, very deep things when you're writing a book. And I have found that frequently, not long after the book is done, I start to forget some of those, unfortunately. Like, I wrote a book with a perfumer, and for about 3 months, I knew a lot about how to make perfume and what all the notes were, the top notes and the dry downs and everything. And now I'm just like, stuff smells good and comes out of whales and beavers and things like that.
I know it is embarrassing, because when people expect me to be an authority on something, and it's like you said, for about 6 months after I wrote that book, I could have answered most of your questions, but it tends to slip a bit. Here's a quick side question. I read that you were born in Japan. Is that true?
I was a Navy brat. So, I was a the naval base in Yokosuka, if anyone has any idea about where that is. And then, which my mom still calls me up, usually on Mother's Day, occasionally my birthday, to say that she was in labor for 13 hours and there was no air conditioning. And in those days, they tied you down to the bed. And I always, am apologetic, because naval hospitals are not a great place to give birth, at least not in the 70s.
Well, it's an interesting coincidence, because I spent the first 3 years of my life in Japan, and my dad I was an Air Force brat then, I'm an Army brat then, but I ended up living, in all over the world, in Hawaii, Germany, and through the States. But so I had to ask.
I wound up at Port City, so it was from there to like Keyport, Washington, and
How long through your childhood were you a Navy brat?
There was my folks divorced, so I was like, half the time three-quarters of the time I was with my mom, who was still moving fairly regularly, but then I would go to my dad in basically a different place every time for visiting, like took helicopter rides in Vancouver to one of the islands out there where they had a base and stuff like that. Yeah, that was a heck of a bring your daughter to work day.
Oh my God. Do you feel like all that being exposed to all the different places and cultures played into your creativity?
I don't know about my creativity. It played into the fact that I moved a lot, and it took me a long time into an adult life to set down roots of any sort. Because I worked out once I moved like 20 times before I turned 18, and so there is a real sense of impermanence, and it takes a while to be like, oh, apparently I actually live here and might be from here now. Did you have anything similar like that?
Oh yeah. I mean, every 3 years I still feel like I need to move, and I loved it. I mean, I just love the new experiences and stuff, and I definitely credit it, one, for the exposure to different cultures, like being in Germany and seeing that in Japan as well, but also just for me, having to move every 3 years, and you would move into a new school, and art was always my friend. It was my friend in that it was a place where I could always go to interact and find peace and express myself and stuff. But it was also my friend in the fact that it always helped me be accepted wherever I moved, because there was always usually another group of geeky folks that like to draw monsters, and we would instantly bond. So.
Well, if you were the kid who could draw, then you could totally. Other weirdos would gravitate towards you. Yes.
Yeah. Looks like we have a question for both authors. What is the favorite thing about working off of another text, like a classic fairy tale? Any least favorite aspects?
For me, it's that I don't have to figure out what the plot is doing. I usually have a pretty good idea how it's going to end before I have to get there. Otherwise, sometimes I will get the paralysis of anything could happen. I could go anywhere with this book. Oh God, I need to go lay down. What about for you?
I love it, and as a matter of fact, I would just be happy doing that all the time. But I want to explore my other idea. I don't want to be just the author that retells fairy tales. But part of the reason I enjoy it so much is because every fairy tale has another point of view. There's always the character that's cast as the antagonist and the protagonist, and I tend to always empathize. Sorry, with the antagonist. It's like, what's their story? They're always the more interesting characters. So yeah, I love that. As far as a least favorite aspect, you're often playing with material that so many different people are playing with, so it's a little hard for you to rise above that a little bit. Also, as far as trying to perhaps take some sort of ownership of it, it's not. It belongs to, it is in the public domain, so you're in the, yeah.
Yeah, it's a big playground, and frequently, I mean, there are some stories. For the most part, I am of the opinion that that every author tells a story differently. Like if you give me Hansel and Gretel and you Hansel and Gretel, we will tell two totally different stories. Sure. If you give 10 authors a fairy tale, you'll get 12 different stories, because a couple people will panic and do two versions because they got bored with one halfway through or whatever, and one person won't get it done by deadline because authors are like that. But there's only a couple where I have been like, okay, that has been done so well that I don't need to do it.
Yeah.
And I want to say Deerskin by Robin McKinley is one of them. It's a retelling of Donkey Skin, where and trigger warning, sexual assault if you plan on looking it up. It is a brilliant book, but it is one where I am like, I do not need to retell that story. That has been done, and there is nothing I can say that will improve on that. And somebody did a Little Mermaid one with a short story, and I wish to God I could remember the name, because I was like, nope, that's it. That's how it's told. Yep, okay. Don't have to say anymore.
All right. Do we have any other questions? Anybody want to throw a question? Oh, here comes one, number 8. Let's see if I can find that. Okay. Both Abatha and Mara dip their toe into monstrosity at times.
Oh, yeah. Mara is the hero of Nettle and Bone, and I assume Abatha is the hero of Slewfoot.
It is. What do you enjoy about writing this sort of relationship between humans and monsters?
I mean, they're cool.
I think for myself, once again, it goes back to just taking a different angle on it. I mean, there's definitely a Beauty and the Beast aspect to, witches dancing with the devil. That is fun to explore, but more than anything, just even with Slewfoot, with Krampus, to see that character humanized to some degree and made empathetic by his emotions towards the people around them. I enjoy humanizing monsters like that.
I mean, there's a long tradition of that too. What was it, Grendel, that started with who the author of whom escapes me, which is Beowulf from the monster's point of view. Right. And I think writers frequently are just like, okay, but why is the monster eating all of the Danes? Let's go find out.
Okay, we have another one that says, Brom, how did you sell your first painting? And Ursula, did you start out as an artist or a writer? Let's see, how did I sell my first painting, which was my first painting? It's probably to my grandmother. Oh, actually, it might have actually been, because I know when I was in art school, she felt sorry for me, and she asked me to paint a picture for a living room. And she gave me a swatch of her sofa to match, and I believe her sofa was plaid. So so that perhaps was my first one. Ursula?
I had a T-shirt growing up that my stepfather, as a fine artist, gave me that said, "Real art won't match your sofa." I can't even remember the first painting I sold. I think I was like it was probably a commission. It was probably somebody going, "I've seen the stuff you have. Can you draw this?" And I was like, "You are offering me money to draw a thing? Yes, I will. I will take money for this." I actually started as, well, I wanted to be a writer, and then I realized in college that was perhaps not the most financially solvent career goal. So I became an artist because I thought there'd be more money in it. And yes, I did not make good choices when I was in college. So I put writing aside for a long time and did art. And then art kind of fell into comics, and that fell into writing more. And then it turned out people would also buy words if they were not attached to pictures. And I was like, well, the art is fine, but it's much easier to write they were in a cathedral than to draw them in a cathedral. Right. So, yeah.
All right.
And you said you started out wanting to be a writer and making illustrated stories?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I was doing both. I loved both of them from early on. The art, I believe I excelled early on at art compared to my peers. So, when you get rewarded with praise, you tend to focus on that. So I spent the first 30 years just focused on the art career. And then, and that's, like I said, I began to get burnt out. And that's when I brought back my love of writing.
I hear you.
Here's another question. Brom, do you ever feel as though you need to keep up when it comes to getting into digital work? There just seems to be so much of a push to go that way. If I was breaking into the field now, absolutely. But I feel fortunate that I've established what I do, and the look and finish that I produce is often what people come to me for. If I was trying to do concept work or anything like that, I would be just a floundering duck. I have nothing against digital work. I just do not have that skill set. So. Here's another question. Do you mostly work with images? This is for both of us. Do you mostly work for images and ideas? Do you mostly work with images and ideas that were with you since childhood, or do you focus on creating brand new ones as an adult?
Little from column A, little from column B. I think there's stuff that I have, with horror, I usually try to go for what is a thing that scares me. And if I'm scared of it, then either A, other people will be scared of it too, or B, if I make other people scared of it, I'm not the weird one anymore. So misery loves company. So I go, okay, things looking in through the window unexpectedly scares the crap out of me. And that's a long-standing thing from, being young. So, I'll follow that. But there's also new images come along all the time. I mean, ideas are like mosquitoes in a swamp. It's not that there's any shortage of them. It's that you have to pick which one gets to suck your blood that day, mostly. Yeah. You?
I'm fascinated by the what draws in myself, what draws me to the aesthetic of horror. Because it's not a conscious thing. My earliest memory in Japan, it was Godzilla movies, and back in that day, this was the middle 60s, they had all their monster, Ultraman and stuff. And, I just loved it from early on. And then when we got back to the States, anytime there's a horror movie on, I'm begging the parents to stay up to watch Night Gallery. But, nobody influenced me. My parents weren't that into it. I had an older brother that liked a lot of it. But, what makes people drawn to that sort of thing? One of the I really feel it's born in people to some degree, but one of the analogies I like to make is when if you went to a group of school children and you asked them to draw a toaster, they would find that boring. I think it would be boring to look at their drawings. But if you asked them to draw an evil toaster, immediately it's I want to see what they draw, and I think they would be interested in drawing as well. So I feel like, for me, there's just this inherent drama and things that will bite you and hurt you. I don't know. How about you, Ursula?
I'm reminded suddenly when I was doing children's books as Ursula Vernon. Essentially, I would go around to schools and do school visits. And for the Dragon Breath books, one of the ways I'd sort of start the conversation was I would ask the kids what their favorite monster was. And I would get, it was weird because you always got the dragon kids. And then I don't know if there was something in a unit that they were studying that particular time, because you'd get a whole bunch of cyclopses. And I don't know, maybe maybe a Percy Jackson book had come out that had Cyclops thing, but there was a much stronger vein of Cyclops than I would have expected from kids. And you would go through, okay, dragon, dinosaur, giant squid, Cyclops. There would be the kid there going Slender Man, and I'm like, and you bear watching. And so there's always the one kid. I have occasionally been the one kid, I suspect.
Looks like we have a final question here. It's for both. How much does your sleeping dreams influence your work, if at all?
I tend to have very vivid dreams, but not as much as I think people expect, because dreams are very nonsensical. So occasionally there will be one or two like good images, but for the most part, it's like, okay, I was in the house, and it was the house I grew up in, but it was also my first apartment, and there was a person there, and they were Abraham Lincoln, but they were also my first grade teacher and maybe my father. And you can't really get a good book out of that, yeah. But every now and again, something will come up, and I'll be like, okay, giant city, built out of stone slabs with people living in the shadows fighting dogs. Okay, yeah, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely helps me a lot more with the paintings, because you can get an image in a dream and then want to put it into something. What I find fascinating by sleep is I've often been stuck in a place in a book, like trying to work out what happens next, and it's just like my brain is just not moving. And you go to sleep and you wake up, like the first thing in the morning, it's just like it's all there. Like even before I open my eyes, it's like, oh, I know exactly what that character is going to do, needs to do, and that fascinates me. The fact that your mind is solving problems while you're asleep.
I often find that when I'm just about to fall asleep, my brain usually won't shut up, which happens to a lot of people if you're prone to insomnia or anxiety. Your brain is just like, nope, I'm going to keep talking endlessly about anything. If I can get it to start like doing dialogue from the book or figuring out the next scene in the book, and if I can convince it, no, you don't need to worry about whether all your friends hate you and you will die penniless in a ditch next to Walmart. You need to worry about the next scene in the book. My brain's like, yes, can do. And we'll just start charging through that. I'm like, this is extremely helpful. I hope my brain never figures out what I'm doing to it.
Well, Ursula, I want to thank you so much for joining me here. I want to thank Mysterious Galaxy Bookstore and for all the people that joined us. We'll turn it over to Kelly here.
Let me just say, it has been an honor. I have admired your work for, a lot longer than I will do the math on, because that will just make us both feel old. So, but yes, go buy all of this man's books, especially his art books, because they're spectacular.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate both of you coming out here. Such a huge fan of both of yours. Again, Slewfoot is on sale tomorrow. You can buy it in Mysterious Galaxy. You will get a signed and personalized book plate if you purchase the book starting anytime between now and about a week from now, usually is our deadline. And you can pre-order Nettle and Bone. And I don't think we mentioned Bone, but can we mention Bone? Because
yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I did a couple illustrations for this. One of the characters is a dog named Bone Dog, who's just made out of bones, and I did some art for him that is included. So
yeah, absolutely adorable. All good things, Miss, and I really, really appreciate, once again, all of you coming out tonight. Thank you, Brom. Thank you, Ursula. Have a wonderful night, both of you, and to everyone who is watching.
Thank you.
Thank you for setting this up.
My pleasure. Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.